Hey everyone, Romeo here, a fellow Spanish language learner. Last week, I returned from a 4-day trip in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. During those 4 days, I had hundreds of conversations in Spanish. Some were only 30 seconds, some lasted several minutes, and some lasted much longer than that. I had conversations with taxi drivers, a barber, bartenders, hotel staff, people at restaurants, people outside the resort, and even the guests on a resort that only spoke Spanish. Pretty much every day I was forced to use all the Spanish I've learned over the last 3 years. And after those 4 days, I came away with one conclusion. I am now completely convinced that I do not have a grammar problem. I have a recall problem. Now, to be clear, this wasn't some huge surprise. I've talked before about how I'm able to communicate without a translator. But outside of the occasional obscure word that I've simply never learned, like drink coaster, I can generally find a way to express what I want to say. Sometimes there are multiple ways to communicate the same idea. If one sentence doesn't immediately come to me, I can usually rephrase it another way. That part doesn't concern me anymore. What concerned me were the moments where I needed to say something quickly. Those are the sentences I remembered the most. For example, bring the drinks to us. She already brought the drinks to us. I already got my hair cut, but I already told the person earlier today. Those are the kinds of sentences that slowed me down. Not because I didn't know the grammar. I knew exactly what structures I wanted. I knew that object pronouns belonged in a sentence. I knew when I wanted to compress the sentence instead of repeating the nouns. The problem was retrieving everything quickly enough while someone was standing there waiting for my answer. Eventually, I said what I wanted to say and the conversations kept moving. But nobody switched to English. But for the most part, people understood what I was trying to say. But I wasn't producing those sentences as smoothly as I wanted. And that's an important distinction. Because if I truly had a grammar problem, I wouldn't know what the correct sentence looked like. I'd be guessing. I'd be making random mistakes and I'll be completely unaware of what went wrong. That's not what happens anymore. I know exactly where I'm slow. I know exactly what structures give me trouble. And interestingly enough, those are the exact same structures that slow me down inside structured recall. When I see an English sentence that needs double object pronouns, I can usually produce it. But I'm slower than I want to be. Sometimes I hesitate. Sometimes I mentally work through the pieces before they come together. And sometimes I don't even bother. I just say something simpler instead. That's recall, not grammar. And honestly, that's encouraging because it tells me the problem has become much more specific. I'm no longer trying to learn Spanish. I'm trying to retrieve the Spanish that I already know much faster. That's a very different problem. It also validates something I've said in several videos. Pay attention to your own results. Your own Spanish tells you what needs work. Mine is telling me very clearly that Volume 2 of Structured Recall deserves another pass. The marketing for Structured Recall says to keep moving through the program, and I still think that's the right advice. But it also says something else. If a structure still isn't smooth enough after you finish a module, go back and train it again. That's exactly what I plan to do. Modules 3 and 4 of Volume 2 are where most of these double object pronoun structures live. And based on 4 days of real conversations, those are exactly the areas where I still struggle the most. I also expect the same thing to happen later with the subjunctive. I understand the subjunctive, I know why it's used, but when I'm expressing hope, desire, doubt, or recommendations at full conversation speed, I don't expect those sentences to come out perfectly yet. The same goes for commands. I know the rules. Now I need faster access to the rules. That's a recall problem, not a grammar problem. And honestly, I think that's a good place to be. Because once your weaknesses become that specific, your practice becomes much more specific too. You're no longer studying everything. You're fixing exactly what your own Spanish is exposing. That's why I don't really worry anymore about whether I should study more grammar. My conversations already answered that question. Now the work is making the grammar I already know available immediately when I need it. That's a different challenge, but it's a much more solvable one. And that's exactly the kind of gap I'll continue training as I keep moving through my Spanish studies. And it's something you'll hear me talk about a lot more as I continue closing that gap. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say in this video. If you enjoyed my honesty, give the video a like. It helps more serious Spanish learners find the channel. And if you're a serious Spanish learner trying to build more functional, usable Spanish, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.